Back down the rabbit hole we go, huh? Well, that's the funny thing about Internecion Cube. No one theory ever seems to tie up every loose end, even if I thought I had all the important stuff covered in my first video. Well, lucky for you, the word tie is literally in my name, so I'm throwing my hat back into the ring. This time though, I'm not here to answer questions. I'm here to tell a story. A story about a shady government organization protecting humanity from a godlike parasite at all costs, no matter how many lives they have to ruin in the process. So with that said, what's up my guys and gals, it's your boy Tyromaniac, back with another smoking hot video, and today, I'm talking back about the lore of Internecion Cube. Kinda goes without saying, but spoiler alert for Internecion Cube, so check it out if you haven't. Also, I'm gonna be leaning on my last Internecion Cube video quite a bit, so not a bad idea to check that one out either. Also, spoilers for design, because I'm gonna need all the evidence I can get. Now, just in case you haven't seen Internecion Cube. So basically in part 1 there's this guy named Max. Max is being chased by the feds, so he uses the biomechanical superweapon he just stole from them, her name is Icon by the way, to bail him out. Then in part 2 there's this girl named Kiri. Kiri's chilling in the break room at a facility called Refinoc while her dad, Hans, does his job until the Eldritch Horror Cube infects her. Don't worry though, it's just a flashback. Oh, and there's also this scene with Max and Icon, but that's not important. What is important is part 3, where Max and Icon share a few character scenes before Max gets on the phone with Kiri to talk about why they need to destroy the cube. Then this guy pulls up and bombs a diner. There, that's all the explanation you're getting. On with the video. Look, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to throw some math at you for any of this to work. So, there are 3 things we know that help us figure out the general timeline of events. First is the photo of the Eisenhower Tunnel on Kiri's nightstand, which says it was demolished in 2033 before the series takes place. Second is the photo right next to it that shows Max, Kiri, and a bunch of other kids labeled as the class of 2038, meaning the series takes place before then, since Max and Kiri are both still in high school. Third is actually the description on all 3 parts in the series, which tells us that Max is 15 years old. So, if Max is supposed to be 15, then he should be somewhere between 2nd semester 9th grade and 1st semester junior year. And if he's supposed to graduate in 2038, then that means the series should take place in either 2035 or 2036. Now, we see Kiri's definitely a lot younger in her flashback, somewhere between 5 and 10 if I had to guess. Assuming that Kiri's the same age as Max since they're both in the same graduating class, and that I'm right about when the series takes place, that means the flashback is set somewhere between 2025 and 2031. That would make sense since the flashback confirms that the Refinoc facility is located within the Eisenhower Tunnel, meaning it has to take place sometime before the tunnel's demolition in 2033. To summarize, let's say Kiri was infected sometime in 2028 at the age of 7, that the Eisenhower Tunnel was demolished in 2033, and that the series takes place in early 2036. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to why this is important. If you remember my last video, you'll remember that I had a bit of trouble with the timer hanging above Icon's containment chamber at Refinoc. Well, I gave it some more thought, and I think I've got the answer. And that answer is the centerpiece of this entire story. It all starts with this throwaway line of dialogue from Kiri's flashback.
I wasn't even supposed to come in today. It's a holiday, for Christ's sake.
Now, if someone's getting called into work when they're not supposed to be, like, you know, on Thanksgiving, it's probably because there's some sort of deadline to worry about. So, I'd imagine Hans's team is facing some sort of deadline, and that's what the timer is counting down to. That raises the obvious question though, what project is important enough to cancel Thanksgiving for? Well, it's simple. Icon. I said in my last video that we know Icon was being held at Refinoc since her name is printed above a giant blast door, and that her mechanical body was originally a separate project that Refinoc combined with their research into the cube. That's what I think the timer is counting down to. How much time they have to find a way of combining Icon with the mechanical body. Except it's not to create some new WMD, it's to use it as a way of containing her. But more on that later. We actually see something pretty similar happen in design. Another series Liam Vickers wrote with parasites called left hands that kill off their hosts and give them telekinetic powers. One of those hosts is Callie Ames, aka Subject 12, who's being held at and experimented on by a shady government organization that also just so happens to be called Refinoc, with those experiments being run by our protagonist's father. Our protagonist is John Matthews, by the way. So, one main character's dad is experimenting on another main character who happens to be tied in with an all-powerful parasite. Well, just swap Callie for Icon and John's dad for Hans Bonin, and we've got ourselves a pretty close match. So basically, I think the timer is counting down to when Hans Bonin and his team have to have Icon contained inside the mechanical body. Of course, Icon, being the origin of all evil, probably wouldn't let herself get contained without a fight. Which brings us to the flashback. Riddle me this. If Icon is so dangerous that they need to build a specialized mechanical body to contain her, then why do we only see 40 infections? Well, I think it's because Icon was being kept dormant, and the infections we see, including Kiri's, were caused by small fragments of herself that got broken off. Going back to design, this is actually one of the ways left-hand parasites reproduce, by breaking off a piece of themselves and planting it inside a new host. Look back at Kiri's infection, and this is pretty much exactly what we see happen. Anyways, if Icon was being kept dormant, that explains all the weird things that happened before Kiri got infected. The water running across the road towards the facility, the messages flashing on the vending machine, and the power outage. They happened because Hans's team accidentally woke up Icon while trying to contain her inside the mechanical body. And we all know how that story ends. So, Icon breaches containment and assimilates anyone unlucky enough to be in range. Fortunately for Refinoc, the fact that all this happens in 2028 when the Eisenhower Tunnel isn't demolished until 2033 means that Refinoc was able to successfully recontain Icon, since I doubt they just let her run loose for 5 years. Same goes for anyone Icon infected while she escaped, very much including Kiri. I'd say it's pretty safe to assume that Refinoc would take them into custody just for good measure. Bringing everything together, Hans Bonin was called into Refinoc on Thanksgiving 2028 because his team needed him to help them contain Icon using a specialized mechanical body before they passed the deadline. Unfortunately, they snapped Icon out of her dormant state in the process, leading to a massive containment breach as Icon assimilated almost everyone in the facility, including Kiri. Eventually, Refinoc was able to get the situation back under control, recontaining Icon and anyone she infected just to be safe. And also, they're not just gonna pass on free test subjects. Unfortunately for Refinoc, this won't be the last containment breach they're gonna have to deal with. So, Icon's awake, and she's got a shiny new mechanical body that effectively neuters her abilities. Plus, she's got 5 years of time to kill until 2033 that I'd assume she'd use to adapt to the mechanical body and figure out how it works, and more importantly, how to work around it. So, how does it work? Well, you see, I think it comes down to another thing I couldn't figure out in my last video, which was the text we see on Icon's face in this scene. There are 2 strings in particular that I want to focus on, the first of which says Operation String Godmind Not Found, and the second saying Booting in Safe Mode Error. Starting with Safe Mode, since that one's a bit easier, I think that Safe Mode for Icon means basically the same thing as Safe Mode for a computer. When a computer is running in Safe Mode, it means that pretty much every program is shut down, except for the ones the computer needs to function. Applying that to Icon, I'd say the mechanical body was designed to tamper with and restrict as many of her abilities as possible, meaning she's still dangerous, but she's kept operating way below max potential. Of course, you might be wondering where the error part comes in, but first, Operation String Godmind. In my last video, I said that the cube is split into 2 factions, the Icon AI Hive being a hive mind with Icon at the center, and the dissociated strain, being any infected who broke away from the hive and regained their autonomy. Well, I think Godmind refers to Icon's ability to control the other variants, an ability that the mechanical body disabled, hence the not found part. With Icon's grip on the variants loosened, most of them, including Kiri, were able to break away and form the dissociated strain. This might also explain the whole remaining origin cube only if isolated thing we see on Kiri's desk next to the part about the Icon AI Hive. Now wait, I hear you thinking, if the mechanical body is so good at suppressing Icon's power, then why do you make it sound like another containment breach was around the corner? Well, imaginary viewer, it's because of the error I'm circling back to right now. In my last video, I said that Icon infected the mechanical body and internalized its programming the same way she would infect a human host and assimilate their mind. Well, instead of being an instantaneous thing like I used to think, it would actually happen over the course of a few years as she slowly got better and better at manipulating the programming that kept her power in check, until some point in 2033 when she finally found a way to disable safe mode and regain more or less full access to her power. With an extra 5 years to refine her abilities and recover from being dormant, Icon was yet again able to breach containment, only this time she'd be a lot more dangerous and a lot harder to recontain. However, since Kofi still refers to Refinoc by name in 2036, which is 3 years later, and Part 1 showed Max running from the government after stealing Icon from them, it looks like Refinoc was eventually able to get the situation back under control. If that's the case though, then why'd the Eisenhower Tunnel still collapse? Well, think of it this way. They never would have been able to contain Icon in the first place if she had the power to bring down a mountain, and if it wasn't Icon, then that pretty much leaves one suspect, Refinoc themselves. I do think Icon completely wrecked the facility during the containment breach, but it was Refinoc who deliberately brought the tunnel down, after getting the situation back under control, of course, burying the facility and any evidence of the experiments they were doing. After all, the photo that led us here in the first place refers to the event as a demolition, not a collapse. Anyways, with their tracks covered, I also think Refinoc jumped ship over to the nearby Riddle Air Force Base referenced in the bathroom scene from Part 3, hence the helicopter chasing Max and Icon in Part 1. So, to get everything all nice and organized, both Curie and Icon were being held at Refinoc after the 2028 containment breach. The mechanical body restricted Icon's power and her control over the variant, making it easier for Refinoc to contain her and for the dissociated strain to splinter off. Unfortunately, Icon used her time of confinement to assimilate the body's programming and deactivate safe mode, letting her regain full access to her power. This led to another containment breach in 2033 that Refinoc just barely managed to get back under control. They were eventually able to recontain Icon and the other variants, but not before Icon completely wrecked the facility, forcing them to relocate to the Riddle Air Force Base. Meanwhile, they demolished the Eisenhower Tunnel and whatever was left of the facility inside to cover their tracks. Unfortunately for them, 3 years later, a 15-year-old boy plug walks in and steals their top secret superweapon, kicking off the events of Part 1, 2, and 3. So, this script ended up being way longer than I thought it'd be. I really hate to do this since it kinda breaks the flow of ideas I was going for, but for the sake of keeping the content high quality, and under 20 minutes long, I'm gonna have to split this into 2 parts. Sorry to pull a MatPat on ya, that's just how it's gonna have to be for this one. Don't worry though, because in the next part, we're gonna be looking at how Curie and Icon's time in containment affected them, what Crow and IC-313N are really about, and who exactly IC-52N is. But anyways, that's it for this video, so remember to light up that like button, smoke that subscribe button, drop a big old comment, check out some of the videos on the left, and I will see you guys in the next video.